On the bright side, June has come to an end. On the way less bright side, the Yankees are still struggling, and the swoon looks to have extended to July. Here to break it all down and run through everything going on in the land of pinstripes, Dylan Price and Justin Chevalella with you here, getting together on this Wednesday evening. Both of us fresh off our respective vacations. A lot to break down in that respect, but more importantly, a lot to break down about how the Yankees have continued to struggle. And while it's a less than optimistic way to start things off today, both of us are here. We're hyped up. We're excited to be here with you. Thank you for making us a part of your day to talk about all things going on in Yankee land. But first and foremost, Justin Chevalella, how are you?
Can't complain. Just got off a nice vacation with my mom up to Sanford, where I had interned the last 2 years. Got to watch the Mainers split 2 games, but got to hang out with a lot of the guys that I made friends with last year. So good trip. Just took a 2-hour nap and had some dinner. So I'm fired up. I'm energetic now. And Dylan, how about yourself coming off your own trip?
Fresh off trip to Punta Cana, got back yesterday late at night from JFK. Of course, all the weather in New York played a factor, not for our travels, luckily, but for the fact we were stuck on the runway because they couldn't get us a gate, which is never a great thing, but a fantastic trip. A lot of sunburn. I'm pretty sure we had a incident on Sunday with mild sun poisoning. It was a bit of a
Ooh.
rough stretch. Otherwise, fantastic trip. Shout out Christopher, our activities guy. He was great. But yeah, it was an excellent time. I'm excited to be back, though. Excited to be back where it's not going to burn my skin as much. You can't really see the sunburn right now, but definitely crispy.
A
But
little
pumped to be back.
rosy. A little
Yeah,
rosy on those cheeks.
yeah. It was. It did not apply nearly enough SPF. Did not listen to anybody's advice in that regard. And I'm paying the price for it. But speaking of paying the price, the Yankees paid the price for their classic June swoon that I've now coined the classic Boone June swoon. It's definitely a lot of alliteration, and you can clearly tell I made that graphic today. But it was not the best month of June for the New York Yankees, to say the exact least. 13 and 14, they finished in the month of June, and it was extended into yesterday with a Candidate A loss to Toronto. So it's 13 and 15 since May 30th, and this is a stretch that continues back to 2023 for Aaron Boone and the New York Yankees. 34 and 24 through May 30th in the 2023 season. They then go 11 and 12 in the month of June. 2024, last year they won the pennant. 40 and 19 in the month of April and May, and really one of the best stretches of Yankee baseball we've seen in the past half a decade. And then a 14 and 13 come down in the month of June. And then, of course, this year, 35 and 22 up into May 30th. And now 13 and 14 in the month of June. Justin Chevalella, amongst the many reasons we will break down today of what has gone wrong to get to this point, what is it, in your opinion, that continues to go wrong in this month for the Yankees?
It's the Yankees. You can't look at it and blame this on the fact that Aaron Judge has gone cold in the month of June. You can't blame it on the fact that, Giancarlo Stanton came off the IL and hasn't really been able to produce just yet. You can't blame it on a Paul Goldschmidt slump that some people expected Paul Goldschmidt to do that all season long. And all of a sudden he starts the season out batting over 300 and, off to a great stretch and then, cools down. Yeah, I mean, you could look at those and say those are factors in this, but what does it come down to each and every year? If it happens once, you're like, oh, the whole team went cold at once. But this has happened 3 straight years now. And at some point, you realize this isn't a one-time thing. This is a pattern. And what do you have to do when something becomes a pattern? You have to fix it. I mean, if it's a positive pattern, you don't have to fix it. But this is anything but a positive pattern. This is a negative pattern that we've seen now for 3 straight years. And, in a couple years ago, you could say, well, Aaron Judge ran into a fence at Dodger Stadium. Well, you still have so much money into that, lineup, and you still have other guys that should be able to produce. This team shouldn't be fully on Aaron Judge as much as he is the best right-handed hitter we might have ever seen in Major League Baseball. And sure, he's gone cold again in this little swoon here, but this isn't a one-time thing. And to me, that shows a bigger problem, whether that be the manager, whether that be the analytics department, whether that be the medical department, since injuries continue to pile up. Whatever the case is, this happening now 3 years in a row It's not, something you can just glance over. And as much as we all want to glance over what happened last year because they got to got to the World Series, at the end of the day, you can't glance over the fact that they had this same struggle. It kind of derailed their middle portion of the season, and to the point where you and I, we were here on Bomber Boys last year in a relatively same format in separate cities, kind of freaking out again. But last year it was it all got pushed to the side because the Yankees had built such a big lead. Well, the Yankees' lead has dwindled down to one game in the AL East, and we're recording this at 5:54 Eastern time here on Wednesday. That's an hour before a game that could decide if the Toronto Blue Jays move into first place over the New York Yankees. That's where this differs from last year, and you should probably have a solution by now. You see it happen one year. You know what? All right. You know what? It was a 1 year thing. It happens 2 years in a row. You're like, all right, this should, probably be looked into. There's no reason, there's no excuse for the Yankees to have done this 3 years in a row. And the fact that a couple off seasons ago, we were talking about that audit of the organization, they clearly missed the June part of the audit because 3 years in a row and the first June happened before that audit. I'm not sure what's wrong, but I can tell you, I don't put blame on any specific player. It's got to go. And there's plenty of players that are not living up to what they should be. And I'm not trying to say like it's acceptable, but DJ's thrown out there every day or what is going on with, Judge right now or stuff like that. But what I'm saying is I don't think you can put the blame on the players until anything changes in the behind the scenes or even the manager in the dugout and the coaching staff. That's where I'm at. This problem, 3 years running strong, there is at least one person in that dugout that's been there all 3 years. And I think we all know who I'm talking about. The guy that's name is on this little lower third that Dylan created.
When you talk about something that could be a flash in the pan, the past kind of April, May stints that, we've been out in state college for, we've been pretty positive about the team. It gets us to the point that we're kind of at the end of the school year at those points that we're doing sporkles. This year we were fixated on graduation and what our other antics were up to and our broadcasts and whatever. And we don't really have to talk about the bad as much. Sure, there's always things that we sit there and nitpick, but at the end of it, you and I kind of always end with, well, this is still a team in the first place in the American League East, or this is still a team with a, American League MVP in one of the last 2 years, and really consistent performances in these months from a lot of the guys that we're about to kind of rag on, and we've ragged on in the past couple weeks that haven't performed, that you kind of look back to one thing, like you said, and it's the same guy with the same approach and the same answers and the same dull response to this every time. And it's Aaron Boone. And it's a podium approach too, where he goes up there and he's fielding blistering hot questions from reporters who are saying, let's point out this issue. Let's point out this issue. And the same overwhelming sentiment from Boone is it's right in front of us. And it is a slogan that you and I have belittled for years on end now about Aaron Boone, that we find it to be incredibly, it just seems like it's facetious. It seems like it is just completely failing to read the room time and time again. And it's why a lot of Yankees fans harbor a lot of ill will towards Aaron Boone. It's not because of the fact they just won an American League pennant and fell short in the World Series. In fact, that got him a lot more love from Yankees fans, despite the falling apart at the end when it mattered most. And it has been for the Yankees. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. But how you finish is considerably improved, but at the same time, considerably left fans feeling more and more like they were just on the edge of their seat, just on the cusp of something great, and finally on the cusp of 28. But when you pinpoint the regular season and you pinpoint moments that make a full 162 game season, you can't continue to get to a point where in the last 3 seasons, you can come up with this stat that I have written down here of 11 and 12, 14 and 13, 13 and 14. Some teams would kill for that. But this isn't the Colorado Rockies. This isn't the Chicago White Sox. This is the New York Yankees, a team that won the American League pennant a year ago. And in April, up into really the start of June again, looked like a team that was capable of doing the same thing again. And in fact, had you and I saying, this might be a better team than the team that got on the cusp of a World Series a year ago. And it continues to come down to mismanagement. And I think there is a huge part of it that's the medical staff as well, because we continue to see guys hit the IL this time of year and miss,
which is normal throughout baseball. But it seems like You
It's
go
happens
through
for
May with for the Yankees, it's the same thing. It's spring
yeah.
training. You get some big injuries this year. Garrett Cole, Luis Heel, Clark Schmidt coming out of camp. And then they kind of go a couple months with an injury here or there, like Jazz getting on the IL. And then June comes around and it's like, boom, Luke Weaver's going to go on the IL. And this guy, Ryan Yarborough, is going to go on the IL. And it's just this, it's year after year.
And whenever it starts, it doesn't stop. And it
Yes.
feels like every time it's just kind of an avalanche that starts tumbling down on the Yankees because it's the injuries, then it's the slumps. And then what we've kind of found that it's boiled down to, and we talked about this a lot last week about Anthony Volpe as well. And hopefully Volpe won't be as big of a subject today, but he always seems to find a way into this program. It feels like Aaron Boone fails to recognize when people need time off. And then when they start to kind of heat up a little bit, fails to play him. And we'll talk about a specific guy in that regard in just a little bit here. And some of the guys that maybe we would rather see get some less playing time that we kind of boil down some of the issues to. But this just feels like year in, year out, Boone fails to deliver in this month. And it gets people year in, year out calling for his head this time of year. And we're seeing it right now on Yankees Twitter that you and I follow so actively, guys saying, if we could go back again, we'd hire, Cone, or we'd hire Flaherty, or we'd hire somebody else. We never would
I
have
would
hired.
have, you know me, I would never have fired Joe Girardi after
Yeah.
2017, but
And it feels like year in, year out, this is the same story and different font. And yet again, the Yankees are where they're at. Any final thoughts on Boone in the month of June? Or I
yeah,
know you're not happy.
there's another layer to it, how I also see it. And I talked about how the on-field performance is, the one consistent factor here is Aaron Boone, and that's not exactly true. There's been players here all 3 years. There's been other guys in the dugout or the bullpen that have been there all 3 years. There's another guy who has been here all 3 years and plenty more, and that's Brian Cashman. And this time of year, each year, it starts to highlight where the failures of Brian Cashman's off seasons are. And that's what we're seeing right now. And we'll get into deeper conversations here in a couple minutes about the bullpen and how bad they've been. And you look at the fact that Tommy Kahnle was itching to come back, and he's having an incredible year with Detroit. And you can look at another guy that took off for Detroit in the offseason, Gleyber Torres, who wanted to be a Yankee for life, is what he said last year. And now the Yankees have a second base problem, which can be solved completely internally, but that's a complete side note that we'll get to in a second. But Gleyber Torres would really help this team. Tommy Kahnle would help this team. And you keep looking at, and as much as, Ryan Yarborough has been great for the Yankees, and as much as a guy like Mark Leiter, I'm still on his side. I know he got hit hard last night, but he has been put into some tough situations this year. He has gotten some bad luck, which Michael Kay talked about on the broadcast last night. I mean, for me, I'm still on the Mark Leiter train. I think outside of a couple appearances here or there, he's been fine. But, you're talking about where you could improve here, the bullpen and the lineup. There's still failures from Brian Cashman that are handcuffing Aaron Boone, quite frankly. It's not all on Boone as much as we like to scapegoat him, and everyone does because he's the guy we see. Not enough people are talking here about Brian Cashman and his failures of the offseason. Everyone wants to talk about Juan Soto, and I get it. But we're well past the point of Juan Soto, especially with how the outfield has performed. Cody Bellinger has picked it up and has been great. Aaron Judge is the MVP, most likely. And Jason Dominguez, who we'll get to again in a second, is hitting well. And Trent Grisham, a good bench option, kind of a starter at this point, but we'll get, again, deeper into that in a second. They're doing fine. We can look away from the Juan Soto fact that he's doing great now. And we can look at other points where the Yankees failed. Can look at the fact they didn't pick up another infielder, and we're relying on DJ LeMahieu coming off an injury in his age 36 season, and Oswald Peraza and Oswaldo Cabrera, who, again, Oswaldo, you can't blame Boone, that injury, horrific injury. Hope he's getting better. But that type of stuff each year, and the catching position. A former Uber driver is the backup catcher, and JC Escara. That's what we're talking about here when I'm talking about how this might have a deeper layer than just Aaron Boone. And of course, everyone likes to point to the fact that the Yankees kind of, and what led to the end of the Girardi era, was the fact that Girardi wouldn't take orders from Brian Cashman in the front office and wanted to do things his way. And how much of this is Aaron Boone managing and how much of this is the analytic department and Brian Cashman managing? But either way, it's worth pointing that Brian Cashman's failures also come up every year at this time. And it's fair because I think it happens for every team, and that's why the deadline is later this month. But it's got to be worth noting at this point that Brian Cashman's failures have come up this month specifically, and they've hurt the Yankees big time.
One of the biggest failures has continued to be the infield. And we can talk about, what could have been with it bringing back Gleyber Torres, but let's talk about something that I think is the perfect thing to point out right off the top today. And it's kind of the DJ LeMahieu, Jazz Chisholm issue, which isn't definitely the most glaring issue on the Yankees right now. I think there's more that we can pinpoint, like the pen and like some of the things we're going to talk about later on the show. But I think this is pretty prevalent right now in Yankees land because of a Chris Kirshner story that came out in the last 24 hours, kind of highlighting Jazz Chisholm's disdain for playing third base right now. And ultimately, bringing Jazz in a year ago was with the expectation, okay, we're getting a third baseman with Gleyber Torres kind of strongholding the second base spot to the chagrin of some Yankees fans this time last year, but ultimately proved out to be consistent in his entirety in the season when it came down to his final numbers. But when it comes down to second base right now with the Yankees, it is not necessarily the approach at the dish, because when you talk about DJ LeMahieu and him playing pretty much every day at this point, he's 5 for his last 18, 350 on base percentage, 9 for his last 41, 220 average, 273 on base percentage. He's not lighting the world on fire, but with a lineup right now that's not doing much better than that, he's really earning his keep, but it's more so the position he's been forced to play. There's the numbers going down on the ticker right now, and to kind of contextualize that a little bit, to kind of punctuate the article that Kirshner wrote, Ryan Garcia of Empire Sports Media broke it down a little bit more. So this is based on the defensive alignment and ground balls in play. So when DJ is at second base, of course, Volpe at shortstop, Chisholm at third. Opponents are batting .310 in that regard. Then when Jazz is at second, Volpe at short, Peraza or Cabrera at third base. Obviously, Cabrera is not a part of this equation right now due to an injury. It's a 191 opposing batting average. There is clearly a void right now when you put DJ LeMahieu at second base and when you force Jazz Chisholm to have to play third base. Because, again, it's not necessarily a DJ LeMahieu problem per se, as you have a 36-year-old guy that it feels like the team, according to this Kirshner article, is jumping through hoops to appease, when you have a guy who looks like the second best position player on this roster right now, and that was, again, a case made in that article from Kirshner, that is much more comfortable, and he's saying it, at second base, and you can't afford to lose him in the lineup, but you could afford to lose DJ LeMahieu.
Not only is he saying that he should be at second base, he's saying that he signed to play second base, not go to third base, and that's Jazz Chisholm. Is DJ the problem? The answer is technically no, in my opinion. You said it best. I mean, I'm glad you highlighted his offensive numbers recently, the 278 over his last 7 games. He's batting .250. Let's be real here. That's still better than Peraza. And it's better than some other options right now for the Yankees. So, no, DJ isn't the full problem. It's about where they're playing DJ. And what that goes back to is the same conversation we just had about Boone and Cashman. Jazz should be at second and LeMahieu at third. And both of them are better at those positions anyway. There's a little bit less movement over at third base. DJ's got the arm for third. And yeah, it's the hot corner, and some might get down the line because he's 36 now. But at the same time, the numbers speak for themselves on the bottom of the screen right now. The Yankees are a better defensive team when Jazz is up the middle. And I think that can be said that the middle of an infield, in my opinion, is more important than the corners of an infield. And I think that has, got to be thought about. And Aaron Boone finally answered the question last night and said, yeah, it's something we'll think about, maybe switching the two. And I think that's all it needs. DJ can be serviceable. I'm not saying he's going to be good. I'm not going to say he's going to be great, but he can be a third baseman and be serviceable for the Yankees for the next month until they hopefully acquire someone at the deadline. And Jazz at second base with Volpe up the middle. And I think that fixes a decent bit of problems. I think there's another option. Jorbit Vivas. I get it. He came up and he didn't have the best in his short sample size, but it's the same thing that you and I have harped on for the 3 years we've done this show about the, situation that Oswald Peraza has found himself in. If you don't give a guy a large sample size, they're never going to be able to prove themselves. Yeah, some guys can show off in a quick 7 games that they're up, and you know what? You're like, all right, this guy can stick around. But some guys need a little bit more time. Some guys need 10, 15, 20 games, and not 20 games sparingly. I'm talking about, in a row. And Jorbit, he played 22 games. He was 7 of 45, which is 156, but he's a better defender than DJ. And maybe you don't get rid of DJ, but you talk about possibly moving Oswald back down to AAA before it seems all but likely he won't be here after the deadline. There hasn't been any reports, but I mean, you can read between the lines when they start playing him in the outfield or, practicing him in the outfield, trying to get him more versatile, just makes him more of an interesting trade target and piece for the Yankees at the deadline. But why not try something like that where Jorbit can get some time? Jorbit can play anywhere in that infield. And I think that could also help with maybe some of the problems we talked about with Anthony Volpe last week, giving him some time off because you could go Jorbit at short, Jazz at second, DJ at third. There's plenty of opportunities, and I know I went off a little from the question, is DJ the problem? My answer remains no. The problem is where they're playing DJ, which he doesn't, I mean, maybe he does choose where he plays. I don't know how it works behind the scenes, but he's not the one going out there and penciling himself in at second base every day. So unless that is happening, then we can call DJ the problem, but I don't think DJ is the problem. And right now, the Yankees need his 250 batting average in the lineup. They need the 350 on base percentage over his last 7 games. They need that. And I'll say that, there's been a lot of criticism of DJ, and part of it is earned because of the defensive factor, but it's not all on him again. And they got handcuffed in the fact that they went and got Paul Goldschmidt, and Ben Rice is playing well as well. So you kind of, or at least, his numbers prove he should be better right now. But, DJ can't play first base because there's a logjam over there. But the short answer is DJ is not the problem. The way they're utilizing DJ is the problem for the Yankees. And there's ways to remedy it now and obviously over the next month. And this isn't the show that we'll talk about trade possibilities, but we'll get into that at some point. And that another infielder is going to be top priority, at least on our leaderboards.
It's why every major outlet, it's why every fan has at some point clamored for Eugenio Suarez, because he continues to excel in Arizona right now, having a career year by his standards. You also have had for over a year now fans clamoring for Ryan McMahon out there in Colorado because at least it's more stability. I hate to tell you right now, he's not batting much better than DJ LeMahieu. He's picked it up a little bit, but sometimes
more homers. That's what they're looking at.
But some guys like him, maybe a change of scenery, losing ball club, go to a winning ball club could be more advantageous. But yeah, that's why some of these guys are being floated right now. It's not because they're trying to get rid of Jazz. Hell no. Jazz Chisholm right now is one of the most productive guys in the last 30 games.
Jazz is the best Yankee hitter going into today's game.
305, 388 on base percentage, 562 slugging. He's also got 7 home runs in these past 30 games, 5 in his last 15. Jazz is raking right now, and Jazz is bringing the energy, the excitement. He's doing what he was brought in to do a year ago around this same time. And the fact that they're appeasing a 36-year-old over a 27-year-old guy who's been face of MLB The Show. He's been a face of this league at points as a young blossoming star. And right now, he's playing like it again, coming back from injury, and he is really the catalyst of some of these somehow performances to even scrape up to a 13-14 record. And so to then sit there and say, okay, well then let's stick DJ at second, let's put Jazz there. The defensive struggles are extending beyond just the DJ Jazz predicament, because you have Anthony Volpe failing to make throws and failing to read some ground balls. And you have a guy who's won a Gold Glove before looking uncomfortable out there at shortstop right now. And maybe part of that comfort really would come back if Jazz is at second and they have a little bit more cohesiveness, and they've built that with a little bit more chemistry, because DJ was on the IL to start the season, and the Yankees were playing well to start the season, and DJ and Volpe doesn't seem to be as smooth of a combination as Jazz and Volpe has been. And the stats back that up as well. But when it comes to third base, if they do ultimately move DJ back over there, you said it perfectly. You can play some roster gymnastics. You could throw Peraza back in Scranton and bring Jorbit up. You could bring somebody else up. You could bring a free agent in, whatever you need to do for the next month. Or you could just leave DJ there because he's been playing serviceably at the dish right now. It's just the defensive side of things that has been lackluster as the entire infield. So when it comes to DJ, sure, he can be the stopgap for now. And in fact, I don't really see a reason for DJ to be the problem that ends up off this roster. I think you said it perfectly. Peraza will probably be that chip. DJ at this point in his career is still endeared enough with Yankees fans that he can be the Matt Carpenter type. He can be that fun vet off the bench in this final stretch. He can be. I don't think he brings that same level.
He's not going to be, and unfortunately, you said he's still endeared by the Yankee fans. Twitter would say the opposite. Or X would say the opposite.
Twitter would say that in their mind right now, John Boy could be the manager of the New York Yankees. And we all know that's not true. At this point in time, well, maybe you think he might be better right now. Hell, I think there's some contingent of the fan base that might think that, like I said. But in reality, DJ is still the same vet who had that incredible 2020 run and is still capable of reclaiming that to at least some Yankees fans. And maybe he could be that off the bench. But more of my equating Carpenter there is he can be that vet you throw on the field for a couple days because he hasn't been that lackluster in comparison to guys like Peraza or Vivas. But when it's all said and done, when we get off after July 31st, Jazz should be at second base. Volpe should be at shortstop. I don't care who you find to play third base, but they need to bring at least a little bit more excitement, a little bit more pop, a little bit more consistency, and a little bit more juice than 36-year-old DJ LeMahieu at this point in time as your everyday third baseman. And you got to make Jazz happy, put him at second, because when he's happy, the team's happy, the dugout's happy, and it seems like this team plays better when number 13 is sprinting all over with a smile on his face. So I don't think, I think we're in agreement on that. I don't think DJ is the problem. But I think in a lineup right now and a team where a lot of guys are struggling, and defensively, this is a team that hasn't actually had that many lapses in that regard in the past couple of years, outside of course, the World Series, when it mattered most. But when you look at that, right now, this is a problem that could be fixed with a simple switch. Let's talk a little bit about guys who have been on and guys who have not been in a new segment of Who's Hot, Who's Not. Let's talk about one guy right now, though, who has been absolutely raking, and it's the Martian.
Yeah, I'm gonna pat myself on the back here as I like to do, because I said it. I think the first week we did this virtually, and I said it again last week. And I've always been on the train of Jason Dominguez, a young guy who he should be playing every day. And it came up in the Volpe conversation last week about how Volpe has played in almost every game, and there's Jason Dominguez sitting down at, I think 15 games he hasn't played, or maybe more than that. I don't know the exact number, but this is a guy that's finally coming around. And to me, prior to his little injury hiccup potential for Trent Grisham, and I know he avoided the IL for now, I was actually going to come on this show this week and say the Yankees should get rid of Trent Grisham. And I know that'll raise some questions, and I'm all for them. I'll answer them. I won't hide and say it's right in front of us. I'll answer the dang questions. But the simple matter of fact is the best Yankee outfield for production is Aaron Judge in right, Cody Bellinger in center, and Jason Dominguez in left. I mean, yes, if you're talking to me a couple months ago, Trent Grisham getting off to that hot start, that's something else. But he's now batting .246, 15 home runs, and 32 runs batted in. Dominguez has played one less game than Grisham. He's batting .253, 6 homers, and 30 driven in. And I know you're like, less homers. That's what Yankee fans like to look at. The matter of fact is he's hitting the ball hard. His last 7 games are on the bottom of the screen, 385. Last 15, he's batting .310. Last 30, he's batting .280. And the on-base percentage, last 7, .385. Last 15, .362. Last 30, .340. And what's most important is he's hitting from both sides of the plate. That was a reason early in the season that I didn't pursue necessarily getting really angry about Dominguez not playing every day, because he couldn't hit from both sides of the plate. But he is hitting better from both sides of the plate. And all of a sudden, for me, there's no reason Dominguez shouldn't be out there every day. And unfortunately, that leaves the Yankees in a tough spot with Grisham, because Grisham is a really good above average defender. He's a Gold Glove winner out in the outfield, which Dominguez isn't. But the issue right now, and maybe where you can ask kind of the same DJ question, is the Giancarlo question. Is Giancarlo the problem with the outfield? Because if Giancarlo's not in the lineup, maybe Judge can DH, and then you can have Bellinger, Grisham, and Dominguez. But right now, with what Dominguez is doing, there's no reason he shouldn't be playing every day. And I'm glad to see that he's starting to get those at-bats. He's starting to get his feel. This was a guy that people were potentially calling the next Mike Trout a couple of years ago. And then he comes up and he gets off to that hot stretch of his career, and then he gets hurt. And then he doesn't really do too well in some limited time last year, and he gets off to a little bit of a cold start. Remember that this guy is 22 years old. He is my age. And, at the end of the day, 22-year-olds are still figuring things out, right? And that's what he was at the plate, and he's figured it out, not just from one side, both sides. And defensively, give me a play. Somebody find me a play that Dominguez has not been, that has made an error or blooper or a blunder, in the outfield in the last who knows how many games. Because I've been watching more recently than I was when we were at school, and I think Jason Dominguez plays a great left field. And I think Dominguez, Bellinger, Judge. That should be your everyday outfield. Grisham can come in and he can give everyone a day off, and that's how you get Grisham playing time. But no matter what, I think Dominguez needs to be in the lineup 5 of 6 days of the week, 6 of 7 days of the week, whatever the amount of games are for the Yankees. Dominguez needs to be in as much as possible.
That's how guys like, back to the IKF of the world, you see them playing over 110, 120 games in a season because, yeah, they might not have that carved out role in the lineup every day. But when you're so versatile and, in Grisham's case, can play right, center, left field in this regard and give any of those 3 guys a day off, well, you find ways to get into the lineup. This isn't saying that Trent Grisham is not going to be in the lineup. And I know that there's a lot of people who still like him a lot more than other players on this roster and would rather see him in the lineup. So I think that that's the misnomer when people say, oh, well, Dominguez plays every day. That punches Grisham out. And obviously he's banged up right now. There's still a role for Grisham to play a contributing factor in this team's success. But when Dominguez is raking, and it feels like a guy who, as you said, is 22 years old, is finding a rhythm and figuring it out, you need to capitalize on that, and you needed to capitalize on that yesterday. Obviously, he's in the lineup today, so they're capitalizing on it tonight. And that's kind of the thing here with the Yankees and the Boone problem is that when you've had the opportunity to capitalize on these hot stretches, they've done it with guys like Trent Grisham and Ben Rice. But when it comes to these prize prospects like Volpe and now in this case Dominguez here, sometimes capitalizing on the hot stretches or figuring out when the cold stretches are has been Boone's biggest problem. Right now, Dominguez is hot. That's undeniable. And I think that's kind of where you have really seen some of the best part of this offense right now. And it's been from a guy who is really starting to find his rhythm. Outfield as a whole looks pretty good with Judge, Belly, really playing really, really well right now. And we could talk about him as well. But in the who's hot, who's not of things, you mentioned Giancarlo Stanton. He's not been hot right now. I think we could talk about that, but I think you and I have chosen to kind of give him a little bit of grace here with him coming back from injury. But there is a position that we have given a lot of grace for some time. I think it's finally time we talk about. Obviously, right now, pretty bad timing for this conversation with Austin Wells dealing with an index finger injury, but I think it's kind of made the JC Escara problem, the former Uber driver turned Yankee fan favorite backup catcher. It's made that a more glaring issue. And then in turn, you look back at what Wells has done before this index finger problem, and he'll be back tomorrow. The expectation per Aaron Boone just an hour ago is that he will catch tomorrow's series finale with Toronto. But it's been pretty apparent for some time now. Wells can hit the ball hard. Wells is pretty productive, and Wells can platoon. Wells can be a backup catcher, but as a starting catcher, that's a larger conversation. But the catcher position with JC as a part of this conversation right now, it's pretty apparent that it is a hole in the Yankees lineup.
Yeah, I mean, look, the old adage in baseball is, you can give up some production from your catcher spot as long as it's defensively good. And I mean, to be fair, it's been defensively okay. I wouldn't say it's been good. I wouldn't say it's been great. It's been okay with Wells and Escara. And you're seeing Ben Rice catching more. I believe he caught 2 of the games over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. He's starting to catch some more, and he's been fine. If that's how you can maybe get some more production from the catcher spot. But I mean, if you look holistically and not just at the little stretches going across on the bottom of the screen right now, and you look at Austin Wells through 69 games played, 11 homers, 45 runs batted in. All right, we're just over halfway, so you can project about 22 home runs, 90 runs batted in. You know what? All things considered, not too bad, right? When you look at it from a Yankee perspective at how much they value the home run, because, it's easier to get one run that way than trying to manufacture multiple hits. But a 222 on the year, a 318 on base percentage to mix in with the 214 average and 275 on base percentage from Wells, it's been disappointing, especially considering Wells was kind of a fast, on the fast lane through the minor leagues. This guy coming from Arizona, lefty catcher. Oh, this could be good at Yankee Stadium, which I'm starting to hate that. The lefties can be good at Yankee Stadium, because I don't think it's really been proven that any lefty has taken that big of an advantage at the stadium. I mean, Juan Soto, I think at some point would actually have had less home runs with the Mets. Not anymore, but he would have had less home runs with the Mets than he would have with the Yankees last year, something like that. And there's a short porch in right field. And Jazz, I think, is taking advantage of it right now, and he might be the only one taking advantage of the short porch in right. But Wells has been, quite disappointing. And those numbers that I read for Wells for the season as a whole, like you said, if that's a platoon, if that's, as a backup, oh, that's wonderful. You'll take that production. You'll take that if he's splitting time with Jose Trevino last year. And Trevino was, early on in the season batting, I think, 250 before he got injured and banged up. That type you'll take, but you can't take this for much longer. And I don't think a lot of people are raising the question about the catching position for the Yankees, but you can tell based off their recent moves with Ben Rice getting some more time behind the plate that they are concerned about it, and rightfully so. I think there's a good chance we don't see JC Esquera with the Yankees for much longer, whether that be finding an internal option or whether that be, trading for someone, a backup catcher like they did with John Ryan Murphy a couple, at this point, probably a decade ago, something like that, just finding one of those guys that maybe could produce off the bench for a little bit. I probably should have gone with Kyle Higashioka instead of John Ryan Murphy, but the point remains that this catching position has been dreadful at the dish. Behind the dish, they've been fine, but at the dish, there's need for improvement. And it's to the point where, let's talk about it. Wells, you have this little kind of asterisk next to it dealing with an injury. So put him on the IL. Why? He's been out of the lineup the last couple of days. And this kind of, now you look at the pattern. Oh, why is Rice catching so much? Because this is something Wells has been dealing with for a little while. Put him on the IL. Give him time to fully rest and see if he comes back. I have a feeling when your finger is kind of messed up a little bit, you're not able to grip the bat the same way. And maybe that's a factor in why he's struggling. But at the end of the day, all in all, between Wells and Esquera, it's not what the Yankees projected with their catching position this year, and it's not going to be anything that gets the Yankees over the hump this year and quite frankly, back to the World Series if you have this many holes, and catcher's a big one here.
There's another guy that you were talking about there that I had stats that I almost put on that ticker. It's Ben Rice, as you mentioned, who, as much as, you talked about, he could be that plug-in guy at catcher right now. That was where he was trained, catcher and first base, when he played in Somerset and played in Scranton last year. He played both those slots. He's played in both those slots well at times. And, maybe first base designated hitter might be his more comfortable spot in the majors. That's where they started him this season. But right now there's a need for it. And there was also a need for a leadoff guy, and a true leadoff guy with Goldie slumping. So you've had Ben Rice thrown all over the diamond and now thrown all over this batting order, and that doesn't help either. And so now you have Ben Rice, who's in his last 15 games, he's 9 for his last 49. He's 20 for his last 100 over his last 30, and his on-base percentage has dipped down to 324 on the season. This is a guy who we've said is unlucky at the dish. He barrels the ball more often than not. He's very consistent. And he's a fan favorite for that reason. He's ultimately likely, we'll find out probably after we're done taping today, the voting, we'll find out if he ultimately ended up even getting into the All-Star game because of it. He barrels the ball well. Fans notice that. The team notices that. The stats are there to back it up. But when you move the guy up and down the lineup and you move him behind the dish and at designated hitter and first base, and you got this guy playing all over wherever, it's going to stymie his consistency and it's going to stymie his success ultimately. And that's where the Cashman Boone conversation gets all the louder, because then you've got a former Uber driver. And again, we're saying that multiple times today. It's not meant to be derogatory, but there's nobody else in this organization right now that they feel comfortable with outside of these three guys behind the dish. So then there might be that void to go out and get somebody, because JC Escara, he's more than productive enough to play at the Scranton level and be there as the third guy in the organization right now. But when Wells is kind of dealing with this injury and slumping, and you mentioned maybe a potential IL stint could have helped that, and you've got JC struggling, and you've got Rice up and down the lineup struggling at the dish, and then now in turn having to play some catcher as well, which can't be helping his production either, there's a need for somebody else. And that's where the Yankees, again, could have brought somebody in, but Cashman hasn't done that. And then you've got Boone trying to play with the cards he's got, but struggling in that regard as well. So it's just a complete Molotov cocktail of crap show right now. And there's really no clear answer, because Wells could come back from this and still struggle coming back from injury and not be at 100%. And he might be being rushed back to an extent because of a need. We don't know any of that right now. We don't have that same medical information Aaron Boone has. But maybe it does mean that JC is no longer on the team and Rice takes more of those catching days that Wells needs off. Maybe they are the ultimate platoon of the future. That could work. It could work successfully. But as it stands right now, something does have to change behind the dish. Maybe it's a healthy Austin Wells, and then that helps JC in turn. Maybe it's Rice and Wells, or maybe it's somebody from outside the organization. But right now, we've put the conversation off for some time, but behind the dish is definitely something that Yankees fans need to pay a little bit more attention to, and the organization needs to take with a little bit more than the grain of salt that they've treated it with for some time now. A lot of panic on Twitter right now over these past couple weeks. A lot of panic as a whole. You started this last week with your question for this, but it's the second edition of the Pinstripe Panic Meter. And there's a new conversation that I think is going to have us producing some higher scores than we did last week when we were talking about Ryan Yarbrough, Will Warren, and that number 5 pitcher slot, especially given Marcus Stroman's pretty solid performance on Sunday, that now has us talking about other arms. It's the Yankees bullpen that has an ERA of 6.45 over the last 16 games. Through the first 69 games of the season, it was a 3.17 ERA. That's 84 earned runs over 238 and a third innings spun. Over the last 16 games, that 6.45 ERA, 38 earned runs in 53 innings pitched, a much, much less impressive number. And over the last 4 games, it's a 10.13 ERA. Fernando Cruz is hurt. Jonathan Loaizaga looks like he's hurt again. Guys are struggling, just like the lineup, all at the same point. Weaver's coming back from injury and looks to be hitting a rough patch for the first time this season. And it feels like everything in this bullpen right now is breaking down at the worst time. But where do you have it on your panic meter?
9.4.
Wow.
You can't win in the playoffs without a good bullpen. And that's the simple matter of fact. I wanted to go lower because it's June, but the simple matter of fact is Clayton Beeter and JT Brubaker right now. And I was always high on Clayton Beeter, and I'm glad he's getting his chance. But, I mean, he was a starter that they didn't like in the starting role. They put him down to the bullpen in Scranton, and we're going to see how it plays over the next couple days after he got called up. But for me, I mean, you can't win in the playoffs, and you certainly can't win a World Series. You saw it last year when Nestor Cortez came out of the bullpen in Game 1 of the World Series instead of Tim Hill. The matter of fact is, I've already mentioned the name once, Tommy Kahnle should still be in this bullpen, and I know a lot of Yankee fans are getting on that as of late. But, I mean, what was once a problem that looked like it was a Devin Williams specific problem, and give credit to Devin Williams, he's turned around his entire season. It's it's spread to everyone at this point. And it's like whoever comes out of the bullpen at this point, you're holding your breath and you're also watching hits and runs. And, part of it is the injuries. Alan Winans came in that game that I went to on Saturday against the Athletics, and he didn't do well. It led to him getting sent down. He was going to get sent down anyway for Marcus Stroman. But the matter of fact that you got like the guys like Ian Hamilton and Jonathan Loaizaga are not producing like we're used to, it signifies two things. It signifies that, you know what, as much as we love those guys, maybe we overlooked the flaws of Loaizaga coming back after not really pitching for a couple seasons. And same thing with Hamilton after getting banged up. Like you look at these and you see the statistics and you see the problems that are starting to occur. Loaizaga over his last 7 games, I mean, he's got a 3.38 ERA, so he's taking it down because the previous 7 before that or previous 8 were pretty bad for Loaizaga. Hamilton, it kind of the same boat, but you look at it. I mean, Hamilton actually last 7's been our best reliever with a 0 ERA over those last 7, but he was struggling before that. And now Mark Leiter yesterday gets banged up or, hit around, not banged up, but he gets hit around. And you start looking, and Luke Weaver too, since coming back from injury. And this was a 6-week injury for Luke Weaver that went away after 15 days. What happened there? Is Luke Weaver pitching through injury? It's a question you want to ask. Is he really completely 100% healthy? Again, we don't know. But what we do know is Clayton Beeter and JT Brubaker in this bullpen at the moment, and maybe one of them finds some fire and starts producing. But you're starting to see the innings go up and up and up for these guys. And you're starting to realize that the depth is going down and down and down. And you have to do something. I think the consensus on Yankee Twitter right now is 2 bullpen arms at the deadline. And we're not talking bullpen arms like Mark Leiter where he can touch 94 on his fastball and he fires a nice splitter. You're talking about guys that are going to blow the fastball right by, because I think that's been the problem. How many years have we been used to the Yankees bullpen firing fastballs at, 95 plus, 97 plus, Dellin Betances, Aroldis Chapman, obviously Luke Weaver and those guys, even Ian Hamilton and Loaizaga, right? And now you're talking about a bullpen that they don't stack up amongst the best bullpens in the league. And it's got to be fatigue. You're in the middle of the season. You get a couple days off here with the All-Star break next week. But if you look at it and you look at Mark Leiter and Tim Hill are leading your bullpen in appearances. Let me say that again. Mark Leiter and Tim Hill are leading your bullpen in appearances. That kind of raises a red flag. And, some numbers like Ian Hamilton's are positive signs, but there's more red flags in that bullpen. And like I said, I put it at a 9.4 for the sole purpose of you're not winning in the postseason without a strong bullpen, especially considering the fact that your rotation is banged up right now. Luis Gil comes back and dominates, and that pushes Yarborough into the bullpen. We can have a talk. I'm more than open to have that talk. But right now, given the current state of the Yankees pitching, they wouldn't win in the postseason. So I have to fire down a 9.4 out of 10.
I'm a little bit less than that. I think that there's some optimism on my end about what you just said. I think that once Gil's back, and right now his recovery was only a little bit stagnant there because congratulations to him, birth of his child. And that's a good reason to take a couple days off from rehab, a grueling rehab for Gil. And when you talk about, what could happen, Yarborough being a part of the bullpen, maybe it is if Will Warren continues to struggle. And we said he's in the diagnosis phase. And I wouldn't say he has struggled over his last couple outings. I think he's kind of trying to earn himself that 5th starter spot. But now you've got Stroman back in the fold, and we know how he feels about moving to the bullpen. So maybe it ends up being 2 internal options, and maybe it is 2 guys who started games for the Yankees this season. And in Warren's case, quite a few of them. Maybe it's Warren and Yarborough as your long relieving guys out of the pen. I think the Yankees still have got hope for Warren as a 5th starter, so maybe it's a Stroman move, but those are good problems to have if those guys are all performing as starters. But the problem right now is the rotation. Even Fried yesterday having a struggling performance that we haven't seen really in a consistent doses from a guy like him who's going to be an all-star this season. It makes things harder for the bullpen. So for me, it's an 8.1. I think that guys like Clayton Beeter, I think he could be pretty good. He's clearly somebody they value highly. And like Hartlieb, who they had up for a day and a DFA'd now, I think with Beeter, he's been project kind of moved to reliever. You said he was a long-term starter option for this team, then who's now become a reliever. We saw him at the opening day last season for a day. He got sent down the following day, so that was a tease. But we've then seen him really moved into the relief role. He's dealt with some injuries. He had a 1.02 ERA in Scranton as a reliever. So there's some good material there, and that maybe this isn't an Alan Winans, that maybe this is more of a, hey, this is a guy we have our eye on as a long-term, real good relief option, kind of like a Chad Green type, and not some guy who's just going to be up for a day and sent back down. So there's hope there, I think, in the organization. And then coupled with Yarborough, Warren, maybe one of those guys, maybe it is Stroman, kind of biting his tongue and moving to the pen. Whatever it is, there could be one of those guys. But as you said, injuries is a problem. You can't go against these numbers. Also, another stat that was put out today on Yankees Twitter, 21 of the 37 losses the Yankees have this season have been blown leads. We saw what happened in the World Series last year. We saw what happened in the postseason last year. This can be a bigger issue. That's why it's an 8.1 for me, because I think this is a team that is more than ready to make moves, whether it's internally and I think still externally, to bring in the right relievers to kind of solidify this pen going into the stretch and then the dog days of summer and into August. I think they'll make those moves. I think they'll make a trade that's almost going to be esque to what we saw of, Frazier, Robertson, Canely, where you bring in two arms in this trade deadline and then also bring in a bat. I don't know if it'll be all three in one fell swoop like that, but I think that's the approach they'll probably take this offseason or in this trade deadline rather, and go out and get two legitimate relievers. And funny that it's Canely that I used as the example there, given how he's performed as we talked about today. But it needs to be something like that where you're getting external help and internal help, because some of these project arms have been exactly that this year. And some have been great, like Fernando Cruz, and others haven't been exactly that. So I think there's a lot of holes, but I'm a little bit more optimistic that there are some internal answers and external answers that they're going to be more apt to make the move for. But you can't deny that right now it's been a struggle bus for the Yankees bullpen. As we kind of head towards the tail end of today's show, I got my timing wrong. We won't get the All-Star results until 7 p.m., which is going to be shortly after you and I wind down. But we do have an All-Star update from this past week while you and I were on our respective vacations. Aaron Judge is the All-Star for the American League, the only guaranteed one at the time of our recording, and the leader of that squad, Shohei Ohtani, for the National League. Really no shocker there. Cal Raleigh as well is going to be a part of this All-Star game. That's guaranteed. He's been fantastic this season, and he is now in the home run derby as well. As for the Yankees in the voting, as of a day ago, did not look great for Goldschmidt and Rice. Maybe there was a late surge from one of the two of them, but I'm not as optimistic there. And when you look at the two of them, I think they both could still find their way on the roster with the Yankee bump. More than likely, I think Goldschmidt. I don't think as likely for Rice, but I think Max Fried, we both expect to be in Atlanta. And going back to last week, the Yankees are going to be well represented out there. Weaver will probably be there as well, and you'll have some guys out there. But I think it's still a little disheartening for Yankees fans that they couldn't get one of Goldschmidt or Rice locked in going into tonight. Again, maybe there was a late surge, but as it looks at this point in time, the only fan voted in All-Star for the Yankees will be Aaron Judge.
I mean, the cold stretches hurt Goldie and Rice, because I'd imagine there was, probably some Arizona Diamondbacks and St. Louis Cardinal fans throwing in votes for Paul Goldschmidt, seeing what he was able to do, and just some baseball fans in general knowing the name Paul Goldschmidt over the last couple of years, but a recent cold streak, bringing the numbers down, and you're like, is that All-Star worthy? And kind of, the same thing with Ben Rice. As much as we want to keep talking about how he's unlucky, at some point you look at the numbers and say, well, that's not an All-Star, because the All-Star would have found that luck at some point, just like Juan Soto did with the Mets, because that's what they were saying for the first month, is he's just unlucky. And, well, sure enough, he's kind of turned it around. The Mets haven't, but at the end of the day, it is disheartening. I think Max Fried and Aaron Judge shoo-ins, maybe I mentioned Rodon last week, and then I think he kind of got lit up in his last start. So it's like maybe, and plus Aaron Boone is managing the team. Is he going to want two of his starters actually getting an inning in that game? But it's certainly disheartening. But at the same time, maybe it's not a bad thing. Give these guys some time to get away from the game, reset their minds with their families, and you know, come back for a second half that hopefully will be full of fun, but at the same time, this is a Yankee team we're used to seeing 3, 4, 5 guys go to the All-Star game, and not just go to the All-Star game, make an impact in the All-Star game. And it doesn't feel like we'll have that this year. And that's saying something for a team that's still first in their division. As much as we've hit the button today of this team is awful, they're still first at the moment. By the end of the day, they might not be. But it is kind of crazy to see. And I think it also just talks about how deep baseball is all around, which I think is actually probably better for the game than watching 5 New York Yankees. I know we're a Yankee-centric show here, but you see some of these new guys getting in, and I think that's more fun, and I think that's bigger for the game of baseball as a whole. And I think it's part of the reason that, I don't know if you saw this report yesterday, but all of a sudden ESPN wants their rights back with Major League Baseball. And I think that's huge for the game. And I think part of that is the personalities, the young stars that are coming into the game and starting to make that impact. And I think we'll see some of them on display at the All-Star game in Atlanta. Got Ronald Acuna locked into the home run derby, which should be fun. I know we mentioned his name last week, but I think as much as it kind of sucks as Yankee fans to not see too many, as baseball fans, I think we should be happy about the guys. I know we don't have the names just yet, but the guys that are projected to get in, it's kind of that new era of baseball. And these are the stars that, we are used to the same guys like Jeter and Pujols and, those guys getting in, year out, Miguel Cabrera and Clayton Kershaw. Now we get to see this next generation come in and put their stamp. I think it's going to also mean, just a more fun event. Those in-game interviews, I think, will be a little bit more fun, a little bit more personable. So I'm not fully disappointed, and I think the Yankees need some of that rest anyway.
I agree. And I think it's good for the game. And you mentioned, obviously, Acuna committing to play in the home run derby. You're also going to have big dumper Cal Riley in the derby as well. So that's already a pretty hot start, already some significant star power. And I think you're going to see a good turnout in the All-Star game as well in terms of some of the new faces of the league. And as you said, we're a Yankee-centric show. If it was 9 Yankees, that's a great.
That's even better.
That's ideal for Bomber boys, but ultimately in a world where we're also diehard baseball fans first and foremost. It's great for the game that you've got ESPN turning their head and saying, oh, wow, this has been a hell of a season so far for Major League Baseball, with a lot of stars emerging and a lot of stars still, again, at the forefront, like the Judges and Otanis, who are at this point in time the only locked in all-stars in the game. As we round out, you mentioned today, they're kind of playing for a lot more than it seems like. And the second game of the 3-game set with the Toronto Blue Jays, or in this season, in this set with the Blue Jays, I can never get the games right. It's been a time. We're both getting back from vacation, so we're knocking a little bit of rust off, the sun off as well, for my end of things. Big game, though, today. The American League East lead is on the line. Tampa Bay Rays and the Toronto Blue Jays both a game back of the Yankees heading into tonight's clash. 7:07 p.m. first pitch. Here's the lineup for the Yankees. Ben Rice leading off, catching tonight, as we just talked about. You might be seeing more of that. Aaron Judge in right field bats second. Cody Bellinger batting third in center field. Giancarlo Stanton, designated hitter. He's, again, the cleanup hitter. Jazz batting fifth at third. Goldschmidt, first base sixth. Dominguez, seventh, left field. Volpe, shortstop, batting eighth. And LeMahieu batting ninth at second base again. And Will Warren is doing the pitching tonight. Again, the very, very pivotal stretch for Will Warren heading into the deadline if he wants to keep himself on the roster. I think you're going to see Clayton Beeter probably tonight in the fold out of the pen after Canada Day's disaster performance from the Yankees yesterday. Been a rough stretch for the Bronx Bombers, but a chance to get back on the wagon tonight and keep their American League East lead in tow. Game is on Amazon Prime. Of course, as always, you can listen to it on WFAN, but Amazon Prime tonight, because you can catch the Yankees on Prime on Wednesdays. You can catch them on Yes most days, sometimes ESPN, who knows where. And that's really the gist with Yankees baseball anymore. But you know where you can always find us on Instagram and Twitter at Bomber Boys Pod, or whatever you want to call it, X, whatever floats your boat. We're not going to judge as long as you follow us, of course. And subscribe to us on Bomber Boys Podcast on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify for the audio version of Bomber Boys Podcast. Before we sign off, any final thoughts, anything you're up to that's sparking your fancy? I don't know what's going on with you this weekend. We're just both coming back from trips.
It's gonna be a fun weekend between the Yankees and the Mets. I don't think we haven't gotten to talk about that on this show, and I know we're kind of probably running on our hour and trying to get out of here momentarily. But you know what? The Mets are struggling, the Yankees are struggling, and somehow this series is going to be must-watch baseball. And right, and obviously there's the second saga of the Juan Soto versus old team, and Clay Holmes pitched earlier today, so I don't know if he's lined up for the weekend, Thursday, Friday, maybe Sunday, not sure. But it's just going to be a fun weekend, and I think it's smart of Major League Baseball to schedule it this weekend. Yankees Mets on the 4th of July weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Should be a fun time, obviously barbecues and all that, but for me, watching the Yankees and Mets go at it, I think it's more of a rivalry at this point, and this is a bigger conversation for a different day, but it's almost a bigger rivalry at this point than the Boston Red Sox, which I think we never grew up really thinking about that. But with how good both teams could be, it's kind of fun. Unfortunately, both teams aren't as good as they could be right now. I think the Mets are 3-14 over their last 17 games.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a fun weekend of baseball, and I hope it brings out, the best of both sides, and hopefully the Yankees go and sweep at Citi Field, but at the same time, just some good baseball games is all I like to root for there. Obviously rooting for the Yankees wins, but I know it's going to be a fun weekend. There should be fireworks, literally and figuratively, and I just think we probably skipped over that one. I know we'll talk about it next week. I think next week when we do this, I'll actually be again in a different state. I'll be back at state, most likely by this time next week. So I think it'll be a fun series to break down. Certainly a good one this weekend.
All over the Bomber Boys have been over the past couple of weeks in this month. And of course, back to State College for you next weekend. I'll be joining you later in the weekend out there as well. And we will have full recap of the Subway Series. And hopefully we both have all 10 fingers. Hopefully you out there as well by the end of the 4th of July. No fireworks incidents, hopefully. Just hopefully fireworks on the diamond. And you could watch them in the sky, but let's not have any incidents where there's any Bomber Boys or any of you out there losing any limbs this weekend, because it seems like every year we hear those stories. I knew that one would get you. Listen, let's see a great Subway Series weekend. Let's get that win back for America after the Blue Jays just dominated the Yankees on Canada today, and hopefully they can scrape out a series split with the Blue Jays, because I finally will remember that it's a 4-game series. We'll be back in the swing of things and back with you again next week. For Justin Chovalella, I'm Dylan Price, as always, here with another edition, another iteration of Bomber Boys.